Welcome to the Conscious Kinky Podcast, where we explore sexuality, connection, and power through awareness and intentional choice.
At the Kink Collective, we help people reframe their relationship with sexuality, build deeper connections, and become safe spaces in the world.
Each episode invites reflection, not performance.
And the conversation continues inside Conscious Conversations, our live community space. Welcome to the conversation. Hi there. Welcome to the Conscious Kinky Podcast.
I'm Joshua.
And I'm Kat. This podcast exists because so many people feel pressure to define themselves by their desires, to label, explain, or justify who they are based on what they want.
At the Kink Collective, our work is simple and intentional. We help people reframe their relationship with sexuality, build deeper and more meaningful connections, and become safe spaces in the world.
Each week, we slow things down. We explore sexuality, kink, and leather, not as identities to perform, but more as information, reflections of how we relate to power, intimacy, boundaries, and choice.
This episode closes month 3 with a reframing that often brings relief. Your sexuality is information, not an identity you're required to lock in or defend. This episode introduces 8 reflection questions. The first 4 focus on awareness, how meaning gets attached to desire.
The second 4 will invite some deeper introspection, how to stay curious without rushing to conclusions. You don't need to answer everything right now. Let this be a listening experience. Take what resonates, leave the rest. Let's begin.
Just as a reminder, as these questions come along, listen to the question, write it down, take about 3 minutes to answer the question, just brain dump. Whatever comes out of your mind, just put it on paper. And in a day or 2, come back and build it out a little deeper, a little more refined. It'll give you some time to process.
Hint, hint, if you don't have paper and pen in front of you, pause and go get some.
Humans are meaning-making creatures. We don't just experience desire, we interpret it. We ask, what does this say about me? Who does this make me? And often those questions carry weight. Pressure to decide, to commit, or having to explain.
But desire can be information without becoming definition, curiosity without conclusion, data without demand. When we treat sexuality as information, right, we create space to learn, adjust, and respond consciously rather than reactively. The question isn't, who am I because of this? It's, what is this teaching me?
This has been a pretty intense month.
I know. If you're still with us, hats off to all of you, right? So these next 4 questions are about noticing where identity pressure shows up.
Let's start with question 1. What do you believe your desires say about who you are? And where did those beliefs come from? Or do they feel supportive or heavy?
This is another one of those questions that, I could answer this different ways depending on different stages in my life, right? When I was younger, I believed that my fiercely felt desires for sexuality meant that people used a lot of words in my day, like, I was that kind of a girl, I was a hussy, there's lots of words that were used for women who wanted to be sexual a lot, right? And they weren't necessarily positive words. And they came from my culture, they came from religion, they came from my family, and I believed them to a certain degree. They felt heavy, but I still couldn't believe that it was all true or that it was wrong. So I just went about my business regardless. Now, I believe that the fact that my desire for sexuality has dialed itself down a little bit because of the stage I'm at in my life, those beliefs mean that I'm not desirable, I'm not lovable, I'm not worth being intimate with. I'm not, there's a lot of beliefs that come around that feel kind of heavy that I have to contend with. So depending on where I am in my life dictates how this question gets answered for me.
I think right now what my desires say about me is I want to feel a certain way. I want to feel sexy. I want to feel desired, wanted. That I want to feel a certain way in my body. Sometimes those desires, the belief around those desires say, is it too much? Are you asking for too much? When will enough be enough? How much of this is a part of me versus how much of it is expected of me? And sometimes they feel supportive in who I am and the space I can take up in a room. Other times it feels like I'm in a space I no longer belong in. Maybe it's like and that boils around like casual sex, like casual intimacy. And not that I do anything casual, but sometimes I'm in casual spaces where there's that stuff happening, and it's like when sex comes on the movie, I'm like, all right, can I fast forward this? I have no interest in watching this. It's like, unless it was Infinity Pool. Infinity Pool knocked it out. Also, listen, Baby Girl, people chopped on it. I liked it. It was kind of a hot movie. But that's what I believe my desires say about who I am. And like you said, different parts of my life, different points of my life reflected different things. I think about when I'm 80 and I'm listening to these 30, 40-year-old guys talking about their wild sex life and who they are and what they're doing. And it's like, I'll be that guy. I won't even be the guy. The person with me would be like, do you know who this guy is? Do you know who he is?
With any luck, that'll be me. At 94, I'll be right next to you saying, "You know who this guy is?"
You know who this guy is? And I'll be there in my rocking chair, just like oblivious to like what's going on. Do you know who this guy was? There's books about this guy.
I love that. All right, question number 2. Where do you feel pressure to label or define yourself? Is that pressure internal, external, or both?
I think labeling myself or defining myself comes when I'm in a space where I need to know where I belong, where I fit in. Like if I'm a bottom and I go into a discussion group that's about tops and topping, like I would feel like it would be important that I label my experience so people know where my perspective and information is coming from.
Cool. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Right? I feel pressure sometimes in queer spaces because it's like, well, who are you and what do you do? What are you into? And this and that. And it's like there's a lot of pressure to have a label in some spaces. Just like leather and kink spaces. Or are you this, are you that, are you this, are you that? And it's like, I'm just Joshua to you. Right? I'm just Joshua. And should you be lucky enough to know me, then we can see where we land naturally, because I'm not going to project who I am to you either. Right? It's like, I don't know who you are and I don't know how we match energetically. Maybe you could be the most subbiest sub in the world and I'm the most dominantest dom. In the right place, in the right time, I desire to submit to you and you desire to dominate me. So where would the label benefit either of us if I came in projecting, having to label myself? With that being said, in high protocol areas or some places where my reputation precedes me, I'm expected to be a certain way. Master Joshua. I'm even getting called Master Joshua in vanilla spaces. And I love it. I deeply appreciate it because it gives me, it helps me feel seen in the amount of dedication and time I've put into my work. And it's kind of fucking cool, man, where in vanilla spaces, people are like, yeah, this is Master Joshua. I'm like, hi, call me Joshua. I think the pressure is internal and external.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pressure is internal and external. For me, I feel pressure to label myself where understanding is needed to be had, right? In conversations with my family, right? The difficult conversations when I'm talking to people who care about me for one way or another, but are not necessarily in this lifestyle or don't necessarily know what all of the labels are or mean. then we have to have a conversation to try to flesh out what are we really talking about, mostly to avoid misunderstanding, to avoid mislabeling or identifying me or understanding where I'm coming from. And that pressure is definitely internal and external.
It's funny, as you mentioned that, I think about when we visit my parents, right? If it's me, you, Natalie, Madeline and Dan were here when I spoke with my parents and I introduced them to my parents. And it's like, I like seeing the uncertainty in their face. They're like, who are these people? And I don't feel pressure to label anyone, right? It's like they know everyone, whoever they meet can potentially be a love interest in my life at any given time.
I think they've got that much down so far.
Yeah,
I think they get that much.
Yeah. The labels with it, I think they're good with not having to put labels. They're just tell everyone I said hi.
In the meanwhile, I still have some discussions to be had on my side.
It's cool, like, because I thankfully, or I don't know, whichever way that goes, is I haven't been asked by my family.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I had to leap over the orientation hurdle at one point with my family. I had to leap over the lifestyle thing, and the next hurdle is the poly hurdle that I have to have by way of conversation.
Yeah, I guess thank God for generations.
Exactly. And it's only necessary to the degree that, like, I have a partner, like, I'm on a good enough ground now with my mom. We've worked through enough stuff that I want her to know about Natalie.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be able to honestly tell her about this person in my life who I love and that she should get to know, which means I have to have a conversation about what that looks like.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do that.
Yeah, I get curious about judgment from the down up, from my kids as they learn more and more about me and the life that I've lived, what that will look like.
We'll find out.
How do labels help you feel safe, seen, or understood? There's nothing wrong with labels. This is about noticing what they provide.
I think it's language, right? Labels are language. It's conversation. It's definition. And to me, the purpose of it is understanding. To bring understanding, to bring light. Like, for instance, in the poly realm, we have lots of words, metamor and, primary partner, authority. There's all these different words that we have to talk about the different aspects of what does it mean to be poly and how does it mean to function in a poly space, right? And I've really resisted a lot of them. But what was pointed out to me, and it's true, is it helps knowing what the terms are and knowing what they actually mean, help people to be able to understand and frame their viewpoint in such a way that I'm seen for who I really am and not for anything that I'm not. And so in that way, labels create safety and a feeling of being seen and an ability to understand when they're used accurately.
I think labels help keep me safe in understanding boundaries and responsibilities, in being able to communicate what is expected of me and what I'm expecting of someone else, so that there's no misunderstanding or less misunderstanding. I think that would be that'd be the easiest way for me to answer that.
And just in general, it's important to say that labels in and of themselves they're not inherently bad. Right. I mean, I've gone through periods of time where I'm like, I don't want any labels. Don't label me. But it's like, the truth is there are certain words that are used to describe what's true about me and who I am. And those words happen to be called labels.
Yeah. I think they're necessary. For a while, I wasn't a big fan of them either, but I think they're necessary.
Yeah.
Where do labels begin to feel restrictive rather than supportive? At what point does definition start to feel like a box?
I think that's when we're using labels as stereotypes.
And projecting them.
I think that's when people want to put labels on other people rather than... There's a difference between having a conversation where you give someone the opportunity to talk into who they are and what they're about and what that means for them and maybe come up with an understanding of a term that accurately describes that. And I'm so sure so-and-so, so-and-so, they've got to be fill in the blank, whatever label you want to put in there. And then you have a conversation where you're just looking for an opportunity to throw that label on the person that doesn't have to do necessarily with who they really are, but has more to do with you feeling like you're right, right? That's where labels become diminutive, they become box-like, they're meant to pigeonhole people, and they're not as helpful.
Yeah, DOMs don't do that. Subs don't do that, right? A DOM doesn't act that way. A sub isn't responsible for that. That's those are some ways that I've heard him be restrictive.
Yeah.
Another way is the projection of, right? Like soft dom, pleasure dom. I can go down that rabbit hole. To me, it's like if I'm hearing a description of what it looks like, to me that sounds like a service top, right? So I think the conversations matter in these, right? Well, what do you mean by this?
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Exactly. Like, if the label's a term, it's like anything we do. And every time we pull up a dictionary definition, what does that term actually mean? What do we mean when someone says pleasure dom? What are they talking about? And if we have a conversation about it, and all of the words used in that conversation point up to the fact that we're really talking about service topping, then that's what the definition is of that. And so it's important to have conversations where we know what terms we're using and how we're defining those terms, what behaviors match the labels.
Yeah, very important. Very important. Again, we just wrapped up with the first 4 questions. Take a minute or 2 or 3, answer each question, then come back to them in a couple days to flesh them out. If you are listening with others, remember this. Clarity doesn't require agreement. This is about your relationship with meaning, not convincing anyone else.
So if you're listening with someone else and you're not necessarily, it's okay. You don't have to compare your answers. You don't have to come to consensus or agreement. What you believe is what matters.
The whole thing here is we're trying to step away from comparing. We're trying to step away from comparison and trying to step into contrast, expanding our perspective and understanding of how other people feel answering these questions and what is their truth in these answers. So if the time comes to share notes, think of it as an expansion of perspective rather than a comparison of lived experiences.
And think about everybody coming to Tuesday night's conversation so that you can share your answers with other people, not just those of you at home in your room together.
Yeah.
Right? That's another way to get some broader perspective and identity by hearing what other people have to say.
Big time.
So encourage all of you to come to Tuesday. So when we loosen the grip on identity, we often gain something else, curiosity. The next 4 questions explore what happens, what becomes possible when we stay open.
Let's jump in. Question number 5. What would it mean to stay curious about your sexuality without rushing to conclusions? What feels scary or relieving about that?
For me right now, I'd have to say it has to do with where I currently am, right? Like if I could stay curious about what this dip in my drive has been about, right? Rather than staying in judgment and conclusion about it, right? It's scary to do because of the things I'm afraid of. But the rejection I'm afraid I'm going to get, it makes me feel afraid I'm just going to end up alone and lonely because nobody's going to want to be with me. So it's relieving to think that I can just be curious about it and see what comes of it rather than taking it as a sentence. Like a death sentence. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be, I can be curious about this next phase of my development and what does that mean?
What does it mean to stay curious about your sexuality without rushing to conclusions? For me, it's about fluidity and staying free in what I want to experience, pushing through shame. Shame feels scary. Like you said, what if something comes up and I'm not enough? Or what if the desire for someone else is bigger than the desire for me and I lose what I already have? So that can be the scary part of it. The relieving part of it could be, wow, that felt fucking incredible. I love that. Let's do it again. Right? Where I realize that the insecurity or the shame or the fear aren't real. That they've just been roadblocks that I've been needing to overcome.
Yeah. Well, I've watched you go through that. right? Have the courage to speak a truth and realize that you weren't going to get rejection on the other side of it.
Yeah.
When you were so afraid of that, right? The freedom that comes from, oh, it can be okay. I can be who I am and it can be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So question number 6, what patterns do you notice in how desire, power, or intimacy show up in your life? Patterns don't judge, they inform.
So, patterns do I notice in how I desire? I like to direct, I like to be in charge, and it's not, I guess I like direction, whether I'm in charge or whether someone else is in charge, but knowing where we're going, knowing what's happening next, or knowing where we're at is important for me. If everyone's flying blindly, there's no progression, I think. There's no achievements, intentional achievements. We may be achieving things, but they just happen to be being achieved versus, well, let's do this, let's try that. And it's fulfilling to say, I set out to do something and I did it.
Interesting.
If I don't have structure, I don't know where the permissions are, I don't know what is permissible.
I have a little trouble with this one. Patterns do I notice in how these things show up in my life? Desire, intimacy, power. The patterns have changed over time, right? And I think this newest phase, right, where I'm having to measure how I'm really feeling against what I want to have happen and what I want to do, is just a new series of patterns to have to work through that I'm in the process of working through. And I think I could probably do to be a little bit more aware, even like notice more patterns. I probably could spend a little bit more time observing myself and observing my interactions and observing my potential interactions and how I feel and how I'm showing up for the patterns. I think I could probably do a little bit more work around that. All of which is to say, if you have trouble answering some of these questions, it's okay.
Well, we encourage folks on Tuesday nights, especially having difficulties answering some of these questions, is when you're in a breakout room, let everyone go first so that you can hear perspective. It can help inform you of vocabulary or perspectives that you may have been unaware of. I do that from time to time. That's actually my favorite thing to do because I get to hear what everyone shares, and it's like it reminds me of things, it teaches me things, it opens my eyes to things. So don't let that be prohibitive of joining us.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if you don't know, even better. Come, because there'll be answers. There'll be shared perspectives that can help you dive into that.
Absolutely.
So question 7, what information might your sexuality be offering you right now about boundaries, about connection, about choice?
So if it isn't clear to all of you, it's getting very clear to me that my sexuality right now is offering me information about slowing down, about less is more, about choosing when I want to engage, making sure that I am choosing the right time for myself. And in some ways, the information may be offering me about getting a little bit, I have to get a little bit more proactive in speaking to what I want, putting that attention and time into it so that I can be the partner I want to be for myself and for my partners.
What information might my sexuality be offering me right now? I think it's about value, quality. I've put a lot of time into perfecting this craft. Not really perfecting the craft, but really perfecting the craft. All right, perfecting the craft.
Well put. No argument.
Reason being is I really want it to be memorable. I want it to be enjoyable. I want to leave a mark on you in your mind and say, man, that Joshua, he was He sure knocked it out the park. What information might it be offering me right now is that my sexuality and who I share it with is a gift and a privilege for those who are open enough to receiving me as I am. And that the other side of that coin is, for all the years that I've been doing it and engaging with my sexuality, it also doesn't define my value as a whole person either, right? So as I change, as my relationship with sex and intimacy changes, it doesn't take away from my self-value.
Awesome. I was also thinking, too, that for me, a lot of what's coming up around my sexuality is offering me information about intimacy, and that I think that I need to start pursuing different vehicles, different avenues for intimacy that are not necessarily sexual in nature, right? I didn't learn that lesson until a little bit later in my life, right? That sex and intimacy are not the same thing. And I think that I could afford to lean into that a little bit more now, too.
For myself also, who I'm connecting with, why I'm connecting with them, how much can I pour into people's cups? How much do I want to pour into people's cups? How much don't I want to pour into people's cups, right? And being real about what these lived experiences are, if it was a one-time thing or if it's a deep invested relationship. I think my sexuality is a way for me to show my love, care, affection towards a person. And it's been my strongest way of doing that for many years now.
Yeah, it's definitely your love language.
So it's like sometimes people are better off with a postcard.
All right. Question number 8. How can you practice becoming a safer space for yourself and others this week? Not by having answers, but by staying present. For me, I think it's listening. Right? I task myself always with learning to listen, listening more deeply, listening not to fix, but listening just to be present. I think that I can practice being a safer space for others and myself, and listening to myself, right? That's another area where I tend to drop the ball, especially if I get uncomfortable. Like I said, when I ask myself a question and what first comes is silence, that makes me uncomfortable. Sometimes I need to hold that space a little bit longer and give myself more time to lean into coming up with answers to questions that I need to have. So staying present for myself is also another way. And then I think that in turn helps to make me better suited when I show up to help others in that way.
I think all I would add to that is to take action on what I'm telling myself. Speak up. Right? I think that'll help me be a safer space for myself and for others. Because if I'm not saying what I need to say, I'm putting myself at risk for resentment. And that doesn't allow me to be a safer space. It adds compromise to the space that I hold. So I think continuing to listening to what I'm saying to myself, what the universe is telling me, what people are telling me, and then taking action on the information, however necessary. If it's sharing how I'm feeling, holding space for another person and taking in what they're sharing with me, if it's something I need to do or change or adapt to or introduce, doing it, taking action on what's necessary, I think is what I can practice to become a safer space, is take action on what's necessary.
You're so insightful.
I get it from her. All right. We're going to go into our review of these questions that we just covered for week 4. Sexuality, information, not identity. The first set of questions, awareness and orientation. What do you believe your desires say about who you are? Where do you feel pressure to label or define yourself? How do labels help you feel safe, seen, or understood? And where do labels begin to feel restrictive rather than supportive?
Our deeper, more introspective questions are, what would it mean to stay curious about your sexuality without coming to conclusions? What patterns do you notice in how desire, power, or intimacy show up in your life? What information might sexuality be offering you right now? And how can you practice becoming a safer space for yourself and others this week?
Thank you, Mom.
You're welcome. You don't need to define yourself to be valid. You don't need certainty to be honest. Sexuality can be a conversation, right? Not a conclusion. So if these questions stirred something, curiosity, relief, resistance, it's information. It's not a problem.
These same questions will be brought into Conscious Conversations, our live community space where we slow this process down and explore together. Conscious Conversation meets every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom.
So, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Kinky Podcast. We will see you soon.
Thank you.